Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, December the 31st, 2025. One thing astrologers are often thinking about is wealth, and what do you need to have in your horoscope to be incredibly wealthy? And, one way of looking at this problem is to consider examples of very rich people. And that's what I want to do in this video. I want to look at the chart of one very rich man, and that is Warren Buffett. Because tomorrow, I think maybe it's at the stroke of midnight, Warren Buffett is retiring. He's retiring as CEO of the investment company Berkshire Hathaway, which he has run for, I think it started in the 1960s. And, he's standing down as CEO. He's still going to be chairman. He's 95 years old. So what is it that makes or made Warren Buffett so wealthy? Could we have spotted it beforehand if we'd had his chart the moment he was born? Was there something that really stood out? And so that's something I want to look at in this video. But first of all, before I look at Warren Buffett, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is New Year's Eve 2025. So here is the chart for today. And the moon is in Gemini, New York time. So London time, the moon moves into Gemini. I think it's at 13:13, so at 13 minutes past 1. So if you're in Europe or Africa, then first part of the day you've got the moon in Taurus. Last part of the day it's in Gemini. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then it won't be until the very end of the day. Perhaps even into January the 1st almost. Yeah, if you're in, perhaps it won't be until very early tomorrow. Certainly, if you're in New Zealand, before the moon moves into Gemini. So that's one thing going on over the course of the day. And aside from that, well, we've got the moon's aspects to consider. I mean, the moon, just before it moves into Gemini, makes a conjunction to Uranus. And so moon conjunct Uranus, that might create some excitement. But, it's a fairly fast conjunction. And then it moves into Gemini and makes a trine to Pluto. So the main non-lunar aspect of the day is a quincunx between Mercury and Uranus. You can see that Mercury is, getting ready to move into Capricorn at something like 2802 Sagittarius, getting ready to make that move. And then just before it does that, it makes a quincunx to Uranus. So Mercury is about the mind, and it's perhaps what we're thinking about. Quincunx Uranus, it might be having to take on board things which we're not ready for, maybe disturbing facts. I mean, my disturbing fact of the day is I was reading an article about Iceland and the weather in Iceland. And Iceland, apparently there was a place in Iceland that got to over 19 degrees centigrade on Christmas Day, which is quite alarming, actually. I mean, it's normally supposed to be freezing. -1 in Iceland, but anyway, Christmas Day it was over 19 degrees centigrade. That might be an example of global warming. But whatever it is, there are disturbing facts that we might have to deal with, or we shouldn't assume that we've got everything sorted out. Mercury in Sagittarius, we might be thinking about all sorts of things. We might be slightly happy-go-lucky with Mercury in Sagittarius. That's something we have to deal with, and that's the Uranus in Taurus. Could be also about the way we talk, the way we communicate. Mercury is a communication planet, so with Mercury quincunx Uranus, some of us might say something we later regret, or hear something that really gives us pause for thought. So that's the broad picture for this New Year's Eve. There are some other things going on. I mean, Mercury is still making a square to Saturn. It's still making. Oh, it's about to make a square to Neptune. I mean, I think that Mercury Saturn energy is still with us. As we go into the new year, and of course that might say something about what this New Year's Eve is going to be. It's going to be like. That might be an important question for you if you are planning on celebrating New Year's Eve. If you're having a party on New Year's Eve, do things look good? I don't know. I think that Mercury square Neptune is it's not great. I think that we have to be very aware of what we're doing. Mercury square Neptune, it's not a great time to be getting drunk, really, is it? And Mercury square Neptune could be about being drunk, or maybe saying things that we later regret when we're drunk. What do they say in vino veritas? When we're drunk, we tend to tell the truth. So if you are going to a party this evening, if you're seeing in the new year, don't assume that everything is going to plan. And with that Mercury still square Saturn, that might make things not quite as fun as they should be. But maybe the moon is in Gemini. If the moon is in Gemini, that might help. Moon trine Pluto. Well, it's not a bad aspect. Moon trine Pluto. Maybe it's good enough. I don't know, but I wouldn't have said that it's necessarily a great day. I'm not saying it's a terrible day. I'm just saying this New Year's Eve, there are probably going to, in the past, have been better New Year's Eves. So that's the picture in New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is, of course, going to be earlier in the sign. It's sort of 22 degrees Taurus. So, in fact, at 22 degrees Taurus, that does mean that the moon is going to be in Taurus, all day. I don't think the moon is going to make it to. It's not going to make it to Gemini this New Year's Eve. Actually, I can just reset that chart. If you are in Sydney, if I reset the chart to midnight, just to see where the moon will be right at the end of the day. You see, right at the end of the day, the moon is going to be at 29 degrees 51. So the moon is going to be heavily void if you're in Sydney. I mean, it's going to be void everywhere because the moon is not making any aspects to traditional planets. But if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it's just a moon in Taurus day, New Year's Eve, not going anywhere, and that may reflect your New Year's Eve celebrations. You don't get that Gemini until January the 1st. So maybe there's no point. Maybe you don't want to go out of your way to enjoy yourself on New Year's Eve unless your expectations are low. So maybe you can have a quiet New Year's Eve. That might be a way to deal with things. So that's Sydney, Australia, and now I want to turn to the heliocentric view. So here is the heliocentric chart for today, and Mercury is now in heliocentric Sagittarius, and it's making an opposition to Uranus. So that Mercury opposition Uranus, we had that yesterday. It's still around. Don't forget, geocentrically, Mercury is making a quincunx to Uranus. Heliocentrically, it's making an opposition. So there's a lot of Mercury-Uranus going on today. Now, does that mean that it's going to be an exciting day? I mean, what do you mean by excitement? Are things going to run smoothly? Are we going to be able to do whatever we like? No, not necessarily. Mercury opposition Uranus heliocentrically can be about things happening that are potentially disturbing. And the question is, how do we respond? And should we panic? I think the answer is we don't panic. And just because something is disturbing doesn't mean it affects us at all. And so it is a question perhaps of how we handle the news flow. And Mercury, when it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a trine to Saturn and it makes a trine to Neptune. So we've got Mercury makes the opposition to Uranus. Perhaps that is what we hear. Then Mercury trine Saturn is how we deal with it. And Mercury trine Saturn is asking us to create some degree of structure. I think that is important, because it may be a case that news information is actually neutral, and we just have to make sure that we utilize what we hear, in the right way. Now, one other aspect what we're starting to feel is an opposition between the Earth and Mars. So this Earth-Mars opposition, it's the same as the Sun-Mars conjunction. There is a developing Sun-Mars conjunction geocentrically. Heliocentrically, we've got the Earth and Mars coming together, and it also links up with Jupiter. So look how Mars is now sort of 6 degrees away from the opposition of Jupiter. So that's going to be forming, over the next week, and the Earth is joining it. So that might be something to look out for. So there is going to be a time when the Earth is going to be on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. I mean, not quite yet, but it's certainly getting there. And so we have to make sure that we don't overdo it. But this is a heliocentric chart, and it just may say something about what is happening in the world. In fact, it might be better to say that there is an Earth-Jupiter conjunction coming up, and Mars is opposition this Earth-Jupiter conjunction. Now, Earth-Jupiter conjunctions, they do happen every year. It's the same as a Sun-Jupiter opposition. But Earth-Jupiter conjunctions can be quite devastating. They can be quite dramatic things heliocentrically. And, we have to look at other things. But an Earth-Jupiter conjunction may pop a bubble. Something might happen which may be very disturbing. There's certainly one of the great disasters in the 1980s had an Earth-Jupiter conjunction. But I'll be talking about that in about a week's time. I'll be looking at examples of Earth-Jupiter conjunctions and to see how they've sort of manifested in the past. But I don't want to over-dramatize. It's no good just looking at one thing. Earth makes a conjunction to Jupiter, because it's such a regular event. It happens every year. We have to look at what else is going on in the sky when that conjunction happens. So now it's time to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, December the 31st, 2025. Aries. The moon is starting to move into Gemini. And certainly if you're in the Americas, for most of the day, the moon will be in this sign, and I think Aries, you're going to be, quite happy for the moon to be in Gemini. I mean, the moon in Taurus was not necessarily great, and there were perhaps things you had to attend to that you didn't really want to attend to, and it is New Year's Eve, and it is a time when many people want to enjoy themselves, want to celebrate the advent of 2026. And moon in Gemini, all things being equal, is kind of easier than moon in Taurus. And so moon in Gemini, it's not going anywhere. I mean, it's making a trine to Pluto, but it's not making any aspects anytime soon. I mean, the moon will eventually make a square to Saturn, but that's not for ages. And so short term, there could be a lot of excitement with the moon moving into Gemini, trine Pluto. But again, where is it all going? It's perhaps going nowhere, and maybe that's a good thing. And that's perhaps the way you want it. There's a lot of potential, perhaps a lot of potential for things to go wrong, but it just doesn't go anywhere. So don't take things too seriously. Don't take other people's promises too seriously, and don't take your own promises too seriously. You can say all sorts of things with Moon in Gemini, but does it actually mean anything? Well, possibly not. Even if you are absolutely sure of yourself and you are speaking with enormous conviction and you're being taken incredibly seriously, even then, deep down, Aries, that it's just words, and that's all it is. So maybe that's the way it is, and you shouldn't regard this New Year's Eve as being especially dramatic. Okay, if you really want drama, okay, there is a quincunx between Mercury and Uranus, and Mercury and Uranus, it might be that you go ever so slightly too far in terms of what you say or how you respond. That might especially be the case if anyone is talking about money, or if you are talking about money, or other sort of crucial material details. A lot of people don't want to talk about money. Maybe you don't want to talk about money, but if anyone does talk about money, then that could be the source of some kind of disagreement. It just might spoil the atmosphere as well. And so maybe Aries, with this Moon in Gemini, one advantage of a Moon in Gemini is, that it is about moving quickly. You don't necessarily want to hang around in one place for too long. You might cause a bit of trouble in one place, but then you can move on to something else. Or even if you are in one place, it's probably a good idea with Moon in Gemini to change the conversation. Don't spend ages and ages talking about one thing. That one thing might seem to be completely trivial, but then if you keep talking about it, then in the end someone might say something, you might say something, and then that would potentially spoil things. So do keep your options open, and I think that it is important, I think, to keep moving. Again, not necessarily geographically, but certainly conceptually. Don't feel that you need to be caught up on any one thing for too long. Taurus. Kind of depends where you are. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you are actually going to have the moon moving through Taurus, all day. If you're going to a New Year's Eve party, certainly Sydney or in New Zealand. I don't know. I don't know about the time zones in Eastern Australia, but it's just Moon in Taurus as you move into the new year. So that might mean that there is a certain lack of excitement. Okay, the Moon is conjunct Uranus, but I don't know how useful that is. I mean, Moon conjunct Uranus might perhaps be events which aren't necessarily very constructive. Now, if you're not in Australia or New Zealand, if you're in the US, then the Moon does go into Gemini fairly early in the day. And with the Moon in Gemini, probably better for the Moon in Taurus if you want to have if you want to have a good day. But then on the other hand, the Moon is out of your sign, and so which way would you like it to be? I think that Moon moving into Gemini does take the focus off you to some extent. You're not the center of things, and that might be something you notice as you move into today, as you move through today, as the Moon moves into Gemini, and that might mean that people are thinking about something else, and maybe you're not getting so much attention. So what do you do with the Moon in Gemini if you're a Taurus? Well, if you're a Taurus, the Moon is making a trine to Pluto, and that might say something about your priorities this New Year's Eve, and your priorities might in a way be quite material. You may not want to enjoy yourself totally. You don't even want to try. It might seem a waste of time because there's just other things going on. And, Moon trine Pluto for you, Taurus, can be about your ambitions and can also about making sure that you are properly rewarded. Now, I know it's New Year's Eve. Things are kind of having their final shutdown. But, do think about how you are being treated. And maybe with Moon trine Pluto, it's a time for making a New Year sort of resolution. And that resolution might be about, you not just being treated well, but making sure that you're allowed to do what you want and also making sure that you are adequately rewarded. And you might not just be happy with the status quo. And as you look at next year, you want to really project yourself and really use the fact that Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto has been in Aquarius for over a year now. And the question is, to what extent have you benefited from it? Maybe you've been aware of a need to make changes in the whole way you present yourself, changes in terms of how you move forward with whatever your ambitions are, and perhaps you're feeling, well, it's not quite good enough. And having the Moon trine Uranus as you hit the new year may be something quite positive. Perhaps even this Moon trine Pluto is going to stay with you for the whole of 2026 and is going to really make you think about what needs to be done. And in the process, Taurus, I think it's going to be very important today that you are positive. Taurians, sometimes they can be quite negative. They can look at the way things are moving. Things can be very slow, and you might think that it's all rather pointless, and you can just have an attitude issue there. But today, it is worth being positive, even if nothing is going on. It appears that nothing is going on. I think that you can have an impact, and this may say something about what you're doing with New Year's Eve. I think that fundamentally, if you look at the astrology of this New Year's Eve from a perspective of parties, social gatherings, it's a bit flat. Maybe worse than flat because Mercury square Neptune and Mercury square Saturn. It's not great. And people might have a wrong attitude. They might be doing the wrong things. You could say, all things being equal, it's probably not a day for having parties. But, you are able to create a change. You're able to, cheer people up, and maybe you should get into the side of Taurus, which is, ever so slightly overindulgent. I mean, Taurians can be overindulgent. It's often said that a Taurus without any pleasures is a very dangerous Taurus. I don't know. You think of Robespierre and the German dictator. So you can think about that. I mean, that's a negative view of Taurus. So perhaps you have the opportunity, Taurus, to cheer everyone up. And if you have that opportunity, I would really suggest that you go for it. Gemini. Mercury is a bit of a problem. I mean, it has been a problem. It kind of remains a problem. And the issue is, Mercury is your ruler, and it is getting ready to change sign, getting ready to move into Capricorn. But before it moves into Capricorn, well, we've already had a square to Saturn. I don't know how you're feeling, but Mercury square Saturn can be a bit difficult. I mean, I've got my Sun in Gemini. Am I feeling Mercury square Saturn? I don't think it's particularly. I don't think it's been such a Mercury square Saturn end to the year. At least that's my subjective experience. But Mercury's moving on. It's moving to a square to Neptune. So you've got Mercury, in fact, aspecting the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so some Geminis might feel a bit uncomfortable. There may be things upsetting you, things you're worrying about, things that are confusing you. There could be sort of fears in the background. So you're not moving into the end of the year feeling entirely comfortable. And then you've got Mercury quincunx Uranus. And, Mercury quincunx Uranus, all things being equal, Gemini, could just stir you up. There's just something that you're trying to get together, that you're trying to understand with Mercury quincunx Uranus, and it's not easy. It could be, about your unconscious mind, things whirring in the background, and you need to pay attention to it. You're almost like being prompted by Mercury quincunx Uranus, and it might have a social dimension, because Mercury is in Sagittarius, in your opposite sign, and so one way of looking at it could be that you are being presented with something that you don't, strictly speaking, want to deal with by other people. That may be a way of looking at it, but there may be an alternative view. It might be that you're trying to get on with other people, but there's something bothering you, something at an almost sort of unconscious level. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily anything to worry about. I mean, if something is seeking your attention, Gemini, then I think you should listen to it, and you should deal with it head on. Because if you don't deal with it head on, Gemini, then it's possible that there could be some sort of vague fears. However, I do think that on balance, the day is likely to get better as it goes along, and that is because the moon is changing sign. So in the Americas, the moon will move into Gemini, your sign, pretty early on. If you're in the UK or Europe or Africa, early afternoon, around sort of lunchtime even, the moon will go into Gemini, and the moon will be making a trine to Pluto. And so perhaps you need to think about what that is about. Certainly the moon trine Pluto. And moon trine Pluto may allow you to just clear all the cobwebs, clear all the mess. I mean, I'm talking about maybe the spiritual mess, things that you don't fully get, and you finally understand something, and something becomes clear. Moon trine Pluto, you can see it, and there may be just a moment of clarity when you understand what it's all about. And this moon trine Pluto could just be about something completely new. Pluto is in Aquarius, of course. Pluto's been in Aquarius for some time. Maybe you haven't fully understood what Pluto in Aquarius is all about. And I'm saying this from a perspective of someone with my sun in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius may be saying something about your spirituality, what you believe in, what perhaps you have regarded as being completely trivial and not worth bothering with, and now it's really knocking on your door in a really big way. And so if you feel that, you should be happy, you should be elevated by it. And so I think that there is an opportunity as you move into 2026 to really rethink what you believe in. And perhaps there are ideas that you have discarded. They just thought they were beneath you. Maybe something you discarded decades ago, but you've now decided that it is important after all. So that probably, Gemini, is something to look forward to. And don't be satisfied with what you have in front of you, because there's always something more, something else you can benefit from. And maybe that's what the day is all about. It's trying to disturb you, actually. But you have to be disturbed, maybe, because if you're not disturbed, you won't be able to move on. Cancer. I think Cancer, we've kind of got a sort of split day here. The beginning of the day, might seem sort of okay. I mean, things, might not be necessarily going anywhere, but, you're feeling vaguely content. You feel able to, by and large, get on with people, and it seems okay. Then as the day progresses, things might change, and as you move into the New Year's Eve celebrations, what are you going to be thinking? I don't think you're necessarily going to want to be bothered. I mean, I know that Cancerians can be party animals. I mean, they can. It's possible. but it all depends. And I don't think right now you're particularly in the mood. And so if you don't feel in the mood, I would be inclined to regard today, New Year's Eve, as just a normal day. I think that's what most people do anyway. I mean, I know that there's this thing about celebrating it and you have to do something, but I don't think you necessarily have to do anything at all. And it's quite possible, Cancer, that you will actually enjoy your own company. And in your own company, you're probably going to be more useful than if you're just in a group, lots of people around you. No, I just don't think that I don't think that's going to work. So what can you do on your own? I mean, you can do quite a lot on your own. On your own, there can be some kind of quiet transformation. As what is it? As Wednesday turns to Thursday, as the 31st turns to the 1st, you change. You undergo a process of transformation. And I think that this process of transformation, is entirely fortunate, but it's not necessarily anything that can be talked about. You are thinking about what changes are required of you. Moon is making a trine to Pluto, and the Moon trine Pluto is arguably the last aspect of the year, and as you move into the new year, that's kind of what you're experiencing. I mean, New Year's Day itself is actually quite complicated. There's a lot going on New Year's Day, but we don't have to worry about it necessarily right now. Let's just think about what is going on at the end of the year. And so I think that there are promptings from your unconscious which you might want to take into account. And how can you possibly deal with other people? How can you trivialize? I don't think that you want to trivialize. You might think, oh, Moon is in Gemini because Moon is moving from Taurus to Gemini. This Gemini can be quite a trivial sign. I mean, I'm saying it as someone who has their Sun and Mercury in Gemini. It can be, but not for you, Cancer. And I think that there are things that you do need to think about, and you need to perhaps think about it on your own. And there may be moments today, as you contemplate the end of the year, when you think about, when you think about what does need to be changed. And if you do want to make changes, if you feel that something has just gone on for long enough, there's no need to exaggerate the change. It can happen in a way that is natural, organic, and is actually very easy. So moving from one thing to another, Cancer, as 2025 moves to 2026, should be relatively easy. Leo, Sun and Venus are getting quite close together. There's a conjunction forming between the two. I mean, the Sun is your ruler, of course. It's sort of 10 degrees 16 Capricorn, and Venus is at 850 Capricorn. So, the two planets, yes, they're both moving at roughly the same speed, but Venus is moving faster. And so Venus conjunct the Sun, we can look at it in several ways. I mean, Venus conjunct the Sun could be about someone getting closer to you. I mean, it could be about a person, Venus. It could also be about the way you present yourself. And with Venus conjunct the Sun, the Venusian principle may be quite close. You're thinking about Venus, and what does Venus represent? Venus isn't just about relationships. Venus can be about aesthetics, what looks beautiful, what doesn't look beautiful, and these may be questions that you are having. Though Venus is combust, and so with this combust Venus, don't assume, Leo, that you've got everything sorted out. Don't assume you've got all the answers. And I know if you're a typical Leo, you might be very persistent. You might want to go with something, see it through to an absolute conclusion, not want it final. You want to go to something quite final there. But I think you have to perhaps be careful. might not have taken enough time to understand something. Understanding does matter. And this might particularly apply to your overall sense of direction. You might be so sure about yourself that you ignore other things. Maybe we're talking about authority figures, where you're going in life, whatever. And you just might be too stubborn. And I'm not saying that's a problem right now, but I'm just saying that it is something that you have to be aware of. But on the positive side, Leo, I think that you are able to be quite optimistic today. You can be enthusiastic, and you can, I think, project yourself very well. A lot of people right now are finding it actually difficult to project themselves. They are holding back, and people are not being open about who they are and what they want. But not you. I think that you are able to fit in most places, and you generate a general sense of optimism, and you can make people feel good about themselves, and the things that you say sound appropriate. And if anyone's feeling sorry for themselves, you will know what to say. And in terms of New Year's Eve, if you've been listening to this video so far, I've been a bit negative about this New Year's Eve. I'm not convinced that it's going to be a great evening for most of us. If we make a special effort to have fun, can you really make a special effort to have fun? Probably not. But if anyone can save the day or save the evening, it might be you, Leo. It's just something you are generating. You're just generating just maybe positivity and just good vibes, and you can be at the center of things. And it doesn't really matter whether the moon is in Taurus or in Gemini, because the moon does switch over the course of the day. If you're in Australasia, then moon is in Taurus. New Year's Eve anywhere else, or certainly Europe, Africa, Americas, as the moon, as 2025 moves to 2026, the moon will be in Gemini. But it doesn't matter where you are. I think, Leo, you are capable at the moment of being incredibly positive, and I think that people can pick up on it. So you are definitely, Leo, a good person to have around, and you can turn what is appearing to be a bit of a disappointment into something that's certainly acceptable. And that's the best we can hope for. I don't think that today is going to be spectacular, but you still, Leo, have an opportunity, perhaps at several levels, to save the day. Virgo, of course, we have to talk about Mercury, because Mercury is doing things, and Mercury is, well, it's just made a square to Saturn. It's applying to a square of Neptune. It's square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. It's quincunx Uranus. So with all of this going on, you, Virgo, might be regarding things as being, ever so slightly heavy. Things are potentially difficult. They take time to manifest, and your own feeling might be one of concern. And you're just not ready to step out. And if that's the way you feel, then probably you should go with that feeling. And so, with Mercury square Neptune, I'm thinking about in particular, there's a lot of scope for being confused, for not understanding what is going on. And again, it's partially caused by the fact that you're just not ready to step out. And if you're not ready to step out, then perhaps you shouldn't. So in terms of your plans for the day, if you do have any plans for the day, I'm kind of making the assumption that everyone might have plans, but if you do have plans to celebrate, I would suggest that you do it in an incredibly low-profile way. It's not a time for going long distances. It's not a time for putting a lot of effort into enjoyment, because I think that's going to be a waste of time, maybe even a waste of money. It's because it's just not going to work. It's just not that kind of day. And with Mercury square Neptune, yeah, you could feel confused, and you might feel worried as well, because Mercury is square the Saturn Neptune midpoint. On the plus side, of course, if we're talking about Mercury square Neptune, there is a spiritual side to that, and it may be that you have a chance to merge into something else, which is beyond yourself. I mean, it could happen if it's done in a way that is very sort of controlled, and you know exactly what you're doing. So it might be a good day for prayer or meditation, or trying to get in touch with some supernatural force beyond yourself. But in a controlled way. One has to be careful. I'm not suggesting you do anything spiritually dangerous, like mess around with Ouija boards or anything like that. I would not recommend that. But the spiritual side of things should not be underestimated. And then we have got the moon changing sign. So moon changing sign does potentially give a rather different flavour to the day. So, this sign change, okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you don't have to worry about this sign change, because it doesn't happen until tomorrow, till January the 1st. But, with the moon changing sign, that might make you think about something else. And the moon, when it changed sign, when it moves into Gemini, it does make a trine to Pluto. And so with that moon trine Pluto, you may suddenly start thinking about your own priorities, and not just your own spiritual priorities. You may be thinking about, what you need to do, what needs to be done, and how best to project yourself, perhaps in the sense of your work or your career. And so if it is the case that as 2025 moves to 2026 and the moon is making a trine to Pluto, that may say something about your whole year ahead, that over the course of 2026, you are looking for ways to recreate yourself, recreate perhaps your routines and the order of your life, and to just give yourself, the best possible chance, of being successful. And I think that's something you're going to want to do. And what you'll be doing is, you'll be channeling the Pluto energy. And for you, Virgo, that Pluto energy is perhaps wanting you to let go of old routines, which maybe they worked very well in the past, years ago. But, so many of us, we are constrained by the routines that we've set up for ourselves. And those routines, at a certain point, they're just comfortable. But just because something is comfortable doesn't mean they're helpful. And I think now we're realizing they're not quite so helpful. When I say we, I'm not a Virgo, but you might realize that some things just have to be changed, have to be completely upended. And if you change the pattern of your life, then you change a lot of other things. And this does allow you to be sort of a lot more successful in your own terms, however you define success. Libra. The moon is changing sign. It's moving out of Taurus and into Gemini. And I think as far as you're concerned, that's quite a good thing. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you won't be able to benefit from that sign change until tomorrow. But if you're in Europe, Africa, the Americas, then you do experience the moon in Gemini. And, from a Libran perspective, well, the moon is in an air sign, and the moon is making a trine to Pluto. And, I think that this moon trine Pluto that we have, at the end of the day is an aspect which I would regard as being pretty constructive. And if you're a Libra, it directly links with you, because think about it. You've got Moon in Gemini, you've got Pluto in Aquarius. What's the third air sign? The third air sign is Libra, and that's you. So you have a chance to look at things in a new way, and really also start to understand what what Pluto in Aquarius is all about. And maybe this can be your sort of New Year resolution to really align to Pluto in Aquarius and to think about what it means for you, Libra. What does it mean for you? It is about you taking the things that you are good at, not just good at, but the things that you enjoy, and just moving them all to a new level, accepting that they are an important part of your life and not being afraid. That really does matter. You don't want to be afraid. You don't want to worry about what are other people going to say. If you are a unique individual, is that going to get a negative response? You don't want to worry about all of that. You just want to be able to be yourself. And I think that Moon trine Pluto may give you an idea about what you can do. And maybe over the course of the day, particularly late in the day, there'll be moments when you are on completely brilliant form. And it's quite spontaneous and it's unplanned. And these moments might just last a couple of minutes, but they exist. So if you can be on great form for a couple of minutes, then surely you can be on great form for all of 2026. Why not? And it's certainly not a time to be worrying too much about what other people are saying, what other people are doing. And at the same time, Libra, you do need to really believe in yourself. I think that is important. Believe that you are the best. That there is nothing that can stop you, and you should be careful when it comes to getting too close to other people, especially as for some Librans it can be quite a social time of year. Remember, the Sun is making a conjunction to Venus, and I do not actually regard this Sun-Venus conjunction as being positive, because Venus is moving into combustion. Now, this combustion is going to get stronger over the next few days, and I will be talking about this combustion in my first few videos in 2026. But right now you just have to remember that not everyone is useful. You might rely on people. You might think that you've got to pay attention to them. You've got to do what they say. You don't want to upset them, and that would be a terrible shame, because you'd be sort of manifesting that combustion, and you might just lose so much if you give another person too much space. You listen to them too hard. In the end, it's got to be your decision. And just because someone is very insistent and they really want your attention and they insist they're right, doesn't mean you should pay attention to them. Because this is a time, Libra, for you to fundamentally believe in yourself, like what I was saying with Pluto in Aquarius. Really believing that what you do is the right thing and is the best thing, and that in the end it's you that matters. So if you are able to put yourself first, then I think that you can go a long way towards dealing with this combustion between the Sun and Venus. And I don't want it to dominate your day. It needn't dominate your day, but it's just that if you spend too much time worrying about other people, being with other people, that could be a waste. So always keep your options open. And this New Year's Eve, it's perhaps particularly important that you keep your options open. Make sure that it's you making the decisions. Scorpio. Moon is leaving Taurus, and I think Moon leaving Taurus, on balance, is possibly a good thing, because when the Moon leaves Taurus, you probably have more space. There are more opportunities to just be yourself. Being a Scorpio, that is what you want to do, and you've got to think about what you want to do, and you need to think. When you're having to worry about other people and you're having to consider the social dimension, it's difficult. It's difficult to focus on yourself. It's difficult to focus on your own core priorities. So Scorpio, you do remember that. And as the Moon moves into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto. So Moon trine Gemini can be very, sorry, did I say Moon trine Gemini? Moon in Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius. Moon in Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius for a Scorpio can mean that there is a lot of focus on yourself, focusing on what you regard as being important and not really wanting to go out of your way to do anything. And that's perhaps what's happening as 2025 transitions to 2026. You know what's important. You're able to look after yourself. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you have very, very clear ideas about what you want to do. I don't think you have any problems expressing these ideas if need be, although I think most Scorpios would probably like to keep quiet. I mean, if there's nothing to be said, why bother? So that might be your general approach. And as far as the seriousness of the day, there is a seriousness coming in, a creeping seriousness. I think if you're in the Americas, that's going to be particularly strong. You're going to be thinking, almost like the moment you get up, you're thinking that there's something going on here. It's not as straightforward as it looks. If you're in Europe or Africa, it might take you a bit more time to realize it, but by the afternoon you'll see that something is going on, that something needs your attention. And if you're prepared to give it your attention, then you might start to realize things, in your own way. I don't think it's anything that needs to be discussed. And when you see what's going on, Scorpio, you'll then recognize that it is best to be cautious, and that should be your general approach. As you go into the evening, as I don't know what you're doing, what your plans are for the new year, but I would probably be inclined to keep it as sort of low profile as possible. Even if you're in Australia or New Zealand and the moon is in Taurus all day long, even then, the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus, and that's not what you want. And so Scorpio, wherever you are, I think that you need to be cautious, and you just need to take a serious approach, and always just look at the implications of things. Everything has an implication. And if you think about the implications, then you'll realize that, things are not necessarily straightforward, and it's just best perhaps to stay on the sidelines, to just wait things out. And, as you move into the new year, as you move into tomorrow, things might be more straightforward. Sagittarius. Well, it's kind of supposed to be a Sagittarian day, isn't it? I mean, when you think about New Year's Eve, a traditional New Year's Eve, you're supposed to enjoy yourself, be yourself, have fun. That's what it's like to be a Sagittarius. But as far as today is concerned, are you really in the mood? I mean, the moon is moving out of Taurus and into Gemini, and so, moon in Gemini is quite a social placement for the moon, but it's not necessarily going anywhere. And it might be the case, Sagittarius, that people promise a lot, or at least you think they promise a lot, but in the end, they're not really able to deliver. They perhaps just fail at the last hurdle. So don't be too trusting. Don't think that people are going to honor their potential. So it's not like anyone is going to necessarily break a promise, but they just might give the impression of being spectacular people, having something spectacular to offer. They might seem to be fun. There's a lot of promise there. But when it comes to the actual reality of the thing, it could all be, very, very disappointing. And so don't be sort of over-reliant on any one person. Try to be as self-sufficient as you can, over the course of the day, and especially sort of into tomorrow, when the moon is for sure in Gemini. And instead, Sagittarius, well, it might be best if you try to perhaps work out what is important, and maybe you need to sort of think about the concept of change, and what kind of changes are perhaps required. And you can see this from a chart. And so Jupiter is of course your ruler, and if you look at Jupiter, you might see, but Jupiter is sort of on its own up there at sort of 21 Cancer, but Jupiter is kind of making an opposition. The opposition is not immediately obvious, but if you look, here is the Sun at 10 degrees Capricorn, and Pluto is at 2 degrees Aquarius. So the Sun is making a hugely wide conjunction to Pluto. It's 22 degrees apart. But 22 degrees apart, what's half of 22 is 11. So if we add 11, if we stick 11 onto 10, that means that the Sun-Pluto midpoint is at 21 Capricorn. And that means that Jupiter is opposition the Sun-Pluto midpoint. And so you're kind of halfway between the Sun and Pluto oppositions, kind of, and so with Jupiter on the Sun Pluto midpoint, that might be about what you take seriously, and there are things that you're going to be taking very seriously, and as far as you're concerned, you have the capacity to create real change. And you don't have to be content with the status quo. And this change can take many forms, but one form might be about money. Maybe money is not what you want to think about, but as 2025 changes to 2026, I think that may be something that you should be focusing on. I mean, remember, Jupiter's in Cancer. I mean, Jupiter's went into Cancer last summer. It's going to stay in Cancer till this summer. Jupiter in Cancer is about money. That's one way of looking at Jupiter in Cancer. I mean, it's about complicated money. It's about financial agreements, the small print, and you need to make things complicated. No, not make things complicated, but you need to accept the complication. It's not just about money. It's about relationships, the complicated side of relationships, the things that are sometimes swept under the carpet. And now with Jupiter making the opposition to the Sun-Pluto midpoint, I think that those complications may be becoming very clear, and I mean that in a completely positive way. And it's not just about today, because you could argue that whatever's going on as the clock strikes midnight, as you hear the time signal that it is New Year's Day, whatever is going on, it's kind of sealed in. It says something about the rest of the year. I mean, this is something I'm going to be talking about in my video for tomorrow, for January the 1st. But something is sealed in. And so what is sealed in here, Sagittarius, is your innate seriousness and your capacity for creating real change perhaps on a financial level. So if you are thinking about money, and again, complicated money, the kind of money that may relate to agreements, trusts, legacies, small print, whatever, that kind of money, as you think about it, then you're going to see that there is a possibility here. There's a possibility to really change the situation, in your favor. It might be a zero-sum situation as well. It could be that your gain is someone else's loss, or maybe someone has been taking advantage of you financially, and you're now aware of it, and you're aware of a loss of power, and you want to get that power back. So if you want to get that power back, I think you can get it back. And again, it's not just about money. It just may be about the way you relate to people and the way power is distributed. And perhaps so far power has been distributed ever so slightly against you. But I think that you now have an opportunity to get that power back, and that might be a theme of next year. Certainly next year through until, while Jupiter is moving through Cancer. When Jupiter moves into Leo, well, that's something different, and we'll talk about it over the summer when that moment finally happens. Capricorn. We still have a lot of planets in Capricorn. We're about to get more planets in Capricorn because Mercury is getting ready to move into Capricorn. But this New Year's Eve, it is a Capricorn time, and the question is, what are you doing about it, and does that reflect your attitude? Well, I think that you're quite down to earth right now. You must be down to earth with all those planets in Capricorn. You realize that some things are just make believe, that they can't be taken too seriously, and so you don't want to waste time on things that are stupid, trivial, transitory, and that just may say something about you and your presence, and whatever you're thinking about in terms of New Year's Eve. And you might start the day being quite sort of open-minded. If people want to enjoy themselves, they want to enjoy themselves, that's fine. But the moon does move into Gemini, and with the moon moving into Gemini, you might find yourself thinking about things again and doing perhaps more analysis than usual. And when you do this analysis, you might be asking yourself, well, what's the point? What's it for? Does it really get us anywhere? And the answer is probably no, because what you want with with this moon sign change, don't forget, moon doesn't just move into Gemini; it makes a trine to Pluto. You want some kind of order. I think that's what you're going to be looking for. And as the day progresses, you're going to want more and more order. You're going to want to be in control. You're not going to want to be prey to random events. People might mean well, but that's not what you're looking for. And so, Capricorn, I think that the concept of control is going to be increasingly important to you, but that doesn't mean to say you're unfriendly. You're very capable right now of being nice, being pleasant. You know how to make people feel comfortable up to a point. So there's nothing unpleasant about you, but you still have a sense of your own boundaries and what is possible. And what you don't want to do is create a mess, because you are looking for order. It's always been about order, and I think that perhaps that's been a feature of the last year. Things are changing, and you're trying to put things back in their place, but they keep changing, and now you are really very much looking for structure. And with that moon trine Pluto that we have today, that might be the aspect for the year ahead. And so, when you think about 2026, what you're looking for is to just have a life that you understand, which is comprehensible, where where everything is. Things don't get lost. You don't waste time having to sort of constantly worry about some area that is a mess. Perhaps it's a mess because of something beyond your control, because of another person's actions, but you don't have to tolerate that. And maybe I'll continue with this when I do my forecast for tomorrow, because you could argue that the positions of the planets at the beginning of the year do represent the whole year. Aquarius. The moon is in Taurus, at least it starts the day in Taurus. So it's been in Taurus for the last couple of days. And so, with the moon in Taurus, you might feel that there are things you need to deal with in your own way as you end the year. Perhaps things need to be wrapped up, or else you just don't feel especially sociable. Why should you? it's a complicated world, and perhaps if you hunker down in your own space, that's fine, and there's nothing to apologize for. Now, the moon, as it leaves Taurus, does make a conjunction to Uranus, and so this conjunction to Uranus may just encourage you to be quite independent-minded, thinking about who you are, what you want to do, and that might be it. I mean, Uranus can also represent events, things happening, or perhaps just realizations, and that might say something about you and your home and your family, and you realizing things that things perhaps aren't quite as straightforward as they appeared to be. And so there's some danger of complications. I mean, I'm not talking about serious complications, but just things happening which force you to have another look at everything, and starting to make decisions which seem to be quite sort of unexpected. So even if you try to avoid trouble and strife with Moon conjunct Uranus, it might occur anyway, but it might just be an internal process, something you're thinking about, something you're becoming aware of, and it might just be a moment of awareness. Now, the moon does change sign. It moves into Gemini. So, in fact, it moves into Gemini this morning if you're in the Americas, early afternoon if you're in Europe and Africa. Okay, not until tomorrow if you're in New Zealand. But, that change from Taurus to Gemini is probably something to welcome. I mean, moon moving into Gemini, Gemini is an air sign, and it's a sign that is quite creative from an Aquarian view, and also you have got Pluto in Aquarius. So moon trine Pluto means that you might become aware of your own power, and perhaps this is what a lot of people are thinking about becoming aware of. I know that Pluto went into Aquarius a long time ago, but still some people are not really aware of it and aware of its potential. And so, if you think about Pluto in Aquarius and what it means for you, I mean, it is your sign, and Aquarius is you. It's how you present yourself. And so with the moon making a trine to Pluto at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026, it might be that this is actually quite empowering. You're able to present yourself in a new way, and that should be your ambition for 2026. I mean, even for 2025, at the end of 2025, the last few hours of 2025, certainly if you're in Europe, Africa, West Asia, the Americas, in fact, most of Asia. It's just if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I think certainly Eastern Australia and New Zealand, the moon won't be in Gemini at New Year on the stroke of New Year's Eve. But it'll get there in the end, and regardless, the moon is still trine Pluto. The moon in late Taurus can still be trine Pluto, and it just may say something about what you should be planning for in 2026. And so if you want to be an individual, if you want to be a militant individual, then I think that you very much can be. I mean, it really is possible. But in the process, don't think, Aquarius, that it's all about you. Other people do have something to offer, and what they might have to offer is positivity and enthusiasm. Sometimes you need a bit of enthusiasm. Maybe you're too focused on yourself and your ideas and the way your mind is going, and sometimes you need an outsider to give you a different view. And if you are unsure about something and you've got negative thoughts, maybe you need to get a different view. And if you get a different view, from someone you trust, you might see that things aren't actually that bad. Something you thought was impossible actually has a real chance of working out. So, don't doubt yourself. Don't be so focused on, where you are and on making sure that everything is secure and stable, and you don't want change. Don't be so focused on that. Consider other possibilities, and if you are feeling negative, another person can make all the difference. Just getting some feedback, getting a different view can really cheer you up, and suddenly you might realize that actually something really is possible, and that might say something about the beginning of next year. Pisces, I'm thinking that this new year is not necessarily going to be especially spectacular. I mean, why would you want it to be spectacular? When things are spectacular, well, things can happen. Things can happen that you weren't really expecting. And I think that many Pisceans are going to sort of want to head for the hills, or the opposite, head for the basement. No, I mean, not literally head for the basement, but you just might regard your own space as being, especially important. You just don't want too much attention, and you may be picking up on what's happening in the world around us. It may not just be you; it's a lot of other people are thinking the same thing, but you may be thinking it maybe more than others. So don't allow yourself to be pressurized. And we have the moon in Gemini making a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. I mean, it's a nice aspect if it's treated properly. That's the way with every aspect, isn't it? You can treat an aspect badly and you can treat it well. You can sort of misunderstand an aspect, you can ignore it, but if you just accept it, you'll be honoring the aspect as well. So moon trine Pluto is really telling you that the real progress is right where you are. You don't have to go out of your way to find what you're looking for. It's all there. And so just by doing nothing, almost, you can have the transformation that you're looking for. And your unconscious is asking for that transformation. And we need to think back to Pluto going into Aquarius. Pluto went into Aquarius, some time ago, for the final time, over a year ago. And with Pluto going into Aquarius, that means there is a shift. It's perhaps a shift in your unconscious. And where does change start? And maybe, Pisces, change starts at an unconscious level. You kind of understand something, even if you can't verbalize it. You understand about where the world is going, how the spirit of the times is changing, and you can start to align yourself to it. And this process of alignment with this moon trine Pluto is, about you, staying where you are on the surface. On the surface, it seems nothing's going on, but deep down, something quite massive is going on, and it really is positive, and it's helping you to sort of move yourself forward. And one aspect we have, which is kind of a hidden aspect that's not immediately obvious, is Jupiter, your ruler, is aspecting the Sun and the Sun-Pluto midpoint. You can see this by eye. You see, there's the Sun, there's Pluto. You can see that Jupiter is miles away from an opposition of Pluto. It's 10, 11 degrees. It's 11 degrees from an opposition to Pluto. Jupiter is also 11 degrees from an opposition of the Sun. But what Jupiter is opposition is the Sun-Pluto midpoint. So Jupiter on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, Jupiter in Cancer, it's in its exaltation in Cancer. It gives you the opportunity to really replenish yourself. It's a very Pluto experience, and not just to replenish yourself, but also to think about what is important to you. I mean, many things may be important to you, and Pisces is a mutable sign. It can go all over the place. One thing can be important to you one day, something else the next day, but there is something of overriding importance. And as the year comes to an end, I think you're becoming aware of, what it is and what you need to align yourself to. So, do think about that Jupiter opposition, the Sun-Pluto midpoint, because I think it's potentially the most important aspect of the day. I mean, it's a relatively slow moving aspect. I think it will be around yesterday. It was around yesterday, and it's around tomorrow. So it's not that fast. But you have to sort of tune into your power, and it also relates to Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter is in Cancer. It's in a part of your horoscope, but is linked with being not just creative, but also uniquely creative. And if you want to be uniquely creative, then something has to change. You have to perhaps be ready to break something. Perhaps connections which aren't doing you any good, people holding you back. But it's your life. This is your life. You need to lead your life in your way. You can't worry about what other people are doing, what other people are saying. And I think that with this Jupiter opposition of Sun, Pluto midpoint, you have a chance to really start the 2026 on the right footing and start the new year with a feeling of your own power. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 64, which is before completion. You could say that this is quite an appropriate hexagram for New Year's Eve. The year is not quite complete. There is one more day left, and we have before completion. And 64 is talking about a river. It's crossing a river. We're perhaps in the middle of crossing a river, and we're thinking about the far bank, and are we going to reach the far bank? Because we have to be careful. It's a big river. We could be swept away if we're not really careful. And one of the images is a fox trying to sort of cross the ice to get across this river, and it doesn't want to fall in. It doesn't want to get wet, and so that might be something that we're thinking about. And we have three moving lines. The third line from the bottom moves. So this third line in the I Ching can often be a difficult line. So it kind of feels like the moment of transition has arrived. I mean, it's New Year's Eve. We're ready. We're ready for 2026. But do we actually have the strength to see it through? So whatever we're planning, certainly today, we should maybe have our doubts. We should be cautious. And this is especially the case if we're taking quite aggressive action. If we do take aggressive action, it could backfire. And, maybe it's possible to, okay, we have to try to cross the river, but we have to do it very slowly. And we just have to be aware of our own fundamental weakness. And it's important to have humility as we try to make this transition. And then the fifth line moves. And the fifth line is a very different line. It is definitely fortunate. It is about starting to make this transition. And we are relatively successful, and we get respect. And then the top line moves. The top line is indicating that actually we succeed. So what is it you're trying to change? Are you in the middle of something and it's not entirely clear, but maybe over the course of the day you can make that change. I mean, inevitably that change will happen if it's about the year. I mean, there's nothing we can do to stop it. It's going to be 2026 soon. There's nothing we can do to change. But as far as today is concerned, yeah, you're not there yet. But the question is, what happens when you're there? And there is a warning here about being careful, because the top line does talk about a new beginning. But it's a new beginning where we have to be stone cold sober. And we have to understand that things are not straightforward. If we get our head wet, there's a problem. Now, what does that mean, getting our head wet? I mean, that's like falling in a river. But it could also perhaps be about being drunk, maybe. That's another way of looking at it. So we don't want to lose concentration at the last moment, particularly if we're in a celebratory mood. If we're feeling really good about ourselves and we feel we've achieved something, that's the very moment we have to be careful. Yeah, we might have crossed the river, but we're not fully secure. Yeah, we do have to be sober as we contemplate the next stage. You know, we cross the river. Now what? Now we do get a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 28, which is preponderance of the great. And preponderance of the great perhaps tells us that we were right to be cautious. We are perhaps in a situation where we are taking on quite a lot. And that might be the experience of moving from 2025 to 2026, feeling that there is a lot of responsibility. I mean, it's a responsibility we can certainly deal with. It comes with making a transition. So if you make a transition, that means that you have to take on a lot more. And it's nothing to be trivialized. But, we can cope. But it's not necessarily going to be easy, and we have to be ready for that responsibility. So that might be about how we're feeling as we move into 2026, that we haven't just made a transition, we've taken on something else. And we can deal with this, provided that we are responsible and we're aware of what kind of burden we've signed up to. And now I want to switch back to the astrology, and I want to quickly look at the horoscope of Warren Buffett. I've never looked at Warren Buffett's chart before. I knew he was a Virgo, but that was about it. And I thought, now it might be a good idea to just look at someone who is very rich and has had a successful career. And he turned 95 this year. So he's had a long life, and giving up this position as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway at the age of 95. I mean, that is quite an achievement. So here, let's look at his chart. And that top right, that is of course Warren Buffett. And so looking at his chart, okay, here it is. Here's Warren Buffett. So he was born August the 30th, 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska. I believe he still lives in Omaha, Nebraska. And you could say that he very much represents the American ideal. When I say the American ideal, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm not American. But, if you think about the origins of America and the founding fathers and the concepts of sort of philanthropy and modesty and not showing off one's wealth, working hard, but also having a responsibility to society. I mean, maybe it is a fantasy, but I would have thought that in a way Warren Buffett is a very American figure. I mean, in a positive way. I mean, I'm just talking about his image. I haven't gone into any detail about Warren Buffett. I'm not trying to look for the dark side of his personality or anything like that. I just wanted to just look at him at face value. And he does seem to me to represent the American ideal of the way Americans should be. And particularly with the emphasis on modesty, which maybe that has perhaps been lost. So as far as his horoscope is concerned, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind with his horoscope is Venus. He has Venus on the midheaven, Venus in Libra on the midheaven. And so, Venus is not just about relationships. I mean, it can be about money, and it's a greater benefic. And it's just about success. I mean, that's the way it can be, particularly if it is in Libra. And you might notice that he's got the South Node in Libra as well. He's got the South Node in the 10th house. And perhaps this makes us think about what the South Node is about. And I've been thinking about the South Node, over the last few years, quite a lot. And the general view on the South Node is often that, oh, it's the past. I often say it's the line of least resistance. It's what comes easiest to us. It's maybe what we should avoid, what we should try to avoid. But maybe also it's about the continuation of the past. Now, if you were to believe in reincarnation, and if you're watching this channel, you might well believe in reincarnation. They tend to go together, belief in reincarnation and a belief in astrology. You might say that, the reason Warren Buffett has been so successful is because he's just been doing what he did before. Maybe in his previous incarnation he was successful, and he's just carrying on with the old business, and so he's good at it. It's just very natural. He knows what he has to do, and it just represents his approach. So that Venus tells us a huge amount, I think, but it's not a chart that is kind of light and free. He has Saturn in Aquarius in the first house. Now, if you were to use the whole sign houses, his Saturn would be in the second house, because the whole sign houses would say, well, he's got Sagittarius. Sagittarius covers his first house, Saturn covers his second house. Now, well, that would work, saying he has Saturn in Capricorn in the second house, even though Saturn is retrograde. Obviously, he's been very successful with money. Saturn is in Capricorn; it rules Capricorn. So that's pretty straightforward. But if you want to use the Placidus houses and say, well, he's got Saturn in the first house, I would be inclined to say he has Saturn in his first house, with Capricorn intercepted in his first house. I mean, I don't think there's any spiritual meaning to interception. I don't think an intercepted house has any special spiritual significance. But you could say he's got Saturn in Capricorn in the first house. Totally fits. That's straightforward astrology. Someone who is serious, is in Capricorn, he understands the value of things, and he works hard. Now, he has a T-square in his horoscope, and his T-square is he's got Mars opposition Saturn, and Mercury is on the T. Now, people say a lot about Mars opposition Saturn, and I say a lot about Mars opposition Saturn. I am quite negative about Mars opposition Saturn, and people associate Mars opposition Saturn with death and tragedy and failure and frustration. Clearly, Warren Buffett has been successful. As far as I know, he's not had any great tragedy, and I know that he did get divorced, I think in the 1970s, and his wife died afterwards. But I don't think there's anything particularly dramatic about that. And so he's lived to 90. He's lived to 95. So he's not had a tragic life, from what I know about him. He's not had a frustrating life. It's been a very straightforward life. I mean, well, so not straightforward life. It's been a very spectacular life. But he has by and large stayed out of trouble. So you look at Mercury, and he's got Mercury on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So this kind of makes us think about what aspects mean in their most positive light. If I say Mercury on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, I would have said that would be someone maybe having grim thoughts, thinking about death and destruction, communicating in a way that is perhaps obsessed about death and so on. I mean, that's a standard way of looking at it. But it's also about serious thinking. And it may be that perhaps the secret of Warren Buffett is he's taking things which may be difficult, and he's seeing at their highest level. I mean, Mercury on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is about serious thinking. Investing is serious. You have to be aware of risk, and you have to be aware of what can go wrong, and it's a slow process. And so it may be that his Mercury square Mars, Mercury square Saturn, and it's kind of interesting. He's giving up his position. He's got Mercury square Saturn in his chart, and he's giving up his position as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, he's still going to be chairman, but he's effectively retiring with Mercury square Saturn in the sky. So he's kind of, really fitting in with that. And that's kind of what we'd expect. And so maybe he is sensitive to the Mercury-Saturn cycle. But I think that Mercury opposition, the Mars-Saturn midpoint, maybe is telling us how we deal with supposedly bad aspects or bad midpoints in our chart. We work with the symbolism. So if you've got Mercury on a Mars-Saturn midpoint, well, you're frugal, you take a disciplined approach, you realize that things can go wrong. I believe Berkshire Hathaway made a lot of money from investing in insurance, and I'm not a great expert on what Berkshire Hathaway do. I don't really know anything about them at all, actually, but I think they put a lot of money into insurance. And so you could say that Mercury opposition, Mercury hitting on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is about insurance, because if you've got Mercury opposition Mars-Saturn, you think about what can go wrong. I mean, that's what you should do. So that would be a way in which that aspect manifests. Notice that he's got moon in Sagittarius. Now, moon in Sagittarius, sextile Mercury, there is a speculative side to moon in Sagittarius. And moon in Sagittarius is his only personal planet in a fire sign. It's in the 12th house. It's rather understated, but maybe he needed that moon in Sagittarius for him to be interested in speculation. And to an extent, of course, he speculates. Of course, he takes risks. But his moon is square the Sun, square Neptune, and with that moon square Sun, you could say, okay, he was born on a first quarter moon. So again, talking about karma and reincarnation, well, he might have Venus conjunct the South Node, which he might be somewhat stuck in the past. But then moon square Sun, if I understand Dane Rudyard correctly, I mean, Dane Rudyard was an astrologer. He wrote this book called the Lunation Cycle. And if you're a first quarter person, it's all a bit new to you. You're still getting used to things. It's not unlike me. I was born with a heavily waning moon, with my sun in Gemini, moon in Aries. So I was born just before, kind of not too far away from the following new moon. So I was born right at the end of the lunation cycle. So maybe I've seen it all before, but with Warren Buffett, it's all new. It's seeing something for the first time, and so that might be how he responds. So he finds it all interesting. Business and finance and whatever, and so he has that enthusiasm, and that links with the moon in Sagittarius. So there's a sun in Virgo. The sun in Virgo is quite staid, even though it's conjunct Neptune, and he does seem to be quite a typical Virgo from what I can perceive of him. But the moon is a challenge there. Yeah, you want to be a Virgo, but there's still the concept of perhaps taking risks, taking chances, and so that is a way of looking at his chart, and also his Jupiter. Okay, he may have Mars in Cancer. Somehow he seems to by and large be able to deal with that Mars in Cancer, but he's got Jupiter. He's got Jupiter in Cancer. And he's got a Jupiter-Saturn opposition in his chart. I mean, it is a wide Jupiter-Saturn opposition. But I do think that sometimes you have to ask yourself, what was someone born into? And he was born the summer following the 1929 crash. And that 1929 crash, it happened as Neptune went into Virgo, as you had that Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So he was a child of the Great Depression. He was a child of the Wall Street crash. And it could be at some, I don't know, sort of intuitive sort of level. I mean, when was he conceived? He would have been conceived, let's see, August, September, October, November. So he would have been conceived November the 30th, approximately November the 30th, 1929. So that was what was going on if you want to play games, you could say, well, maybe one of those stock market traders who jumped off a building on at the end of October 1929, he immediately got reincarnated as Warren Buffett. I mean, it's quite possible. I mean, of course, I would say that. There's no way of disproving it. But, I think that he was just very much linked. His experience was linked with the Wall Street crash at the end of 1929. And I think that perhaps that had a big impact on how he operated. So, someone who died having lost their fortune, thinking, well, I'm not going to go through that again. This time round, I'm going to do it properly. That's a way of doing it. Of course, suicide is a moral sin, isn't it? I don't know. I'm not going to go into the issues of suicide there, but you kind of think that if someone commits suicide, they're not going to benefit by being reincarnated as Warren Buffett, because it's not supposed to work like that, is it? Sorry, I'm rambling. Don't take what I said too seriously. But aside from a Jupiter-Saturn opposition, that Jupiter in Cancer does link with the horoscope of the United States. So here is the horoscope of the United States, and of course, the United States has Jupiter in Cancer anyway, and Jupiter is in Cancer right now, and the Sun, America's Sun, is at 1319 Cancer. So going back to Warren Buffett's horoscope, you can see how his Jupiter, it's how he expands, how he makes his money. Jupiter in Cancer is quite moralistic, and clearly there is a moral code that Warren Buffett follows. I believe he's going to give away the vast majority of his fortune to charitable causes and so forth. There is a morality to him that he has with his Jupiter in Cancer, and also he links with the United States' Sun. So maybe he's in the right place. He's in a place where he can make money, where he can be successful. And then there's a question of his retirement, and his retirement is, I think, related to Jupiter. I mean, I haven't really looked at many things. I mean, the thing that is prominent to me is, if you look at his Jupiter, so he's 95 years old. So if you do solar arc directions, you would progress everything in his, around 95 degrees. So you will see, you can actually see this by eye. Jupiter is 95 degrees away from his midheaven. So if you move Jupiter 95 degrees, it does come to his midheaven. In fact, here are his solar arc directions. So his solar arc directed Jupiter is at 1814 Libra, and if we notice that his midheaven is at 1851 Libra. Perhaps, I mean, we don't know. We've got a time of 3 in the afternoon for when he's born. I mean, it could be 5:02, it could be 5 minutes afterwards. So he's got solar arc directed Jupiter on his midheaven. And certainly from a transit perspective, I often notice that Jupiter on your midheaven is often when you get a job or you lose a job. Clearly, his solar arc directed Jupiter on his midheaven is when it all comes to an end, or at least when he decides to retire. This is so that does seem to fit. So anyway, that's Warren Buffett. I wish him a happy retirement, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.